since Wild Rift Icons is coming next week, we wanted to get your thoughts on the Southeast Asian teams that we are sending this for, right? And they're the ones that are competing for the first ever Icons, global championship. And we wanted to know what you were expecting in the tournament as well. So before we start, I just wanted to ask if you guys could introduce yourself, your background, how long you've been in esports, and perhaps how long you've played League and Wild Rift, and maybe a favorite champion.
Autolose here, and been with esports for over a year now, and been playing League of Legends since season 2. So I guess that's 9 years or 10 years already. Started transitioning onto Wild Rift when opportunity was there. For my favorite champion, Leonard would like it, Singed, at least for now, because he plays Singed Freelo, baby.
Hi guys, I'm Grandon. I've been in esports for quite a while now, but I had to take a little bit of a break for national service in Singapore. But I'm getting back into the groove of things now. I would say that I've been playing League a little later. I started a little later than Auto. I think I started in like season 3. Like I was really into it when Feral Flare was a thing. And I think I transitioned into Wild Rift once beta started. I was a little bit late into the beta, but I was in the closed alpha. Well, either way, I got into it slightly later than the rest, and it was like basically right before launch anyway. So yeah, thereabouts. Favorite champion, probably like Vayne, because I like to think that I'm good.
Vayne is a pain for me. Anyway, Leonard, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just happy to never see Grandon play Vayne in my games. But I've been playing League since about season 2 as well. Played pro for a little, semi-pro for a little bit, coach pro for a while, transitioned over to Wild Rift as caster. Yeah, that's about it. Favorite champ probably be Rice, who is not in Wild Rift. Let me say a different champion. My favorite champion is probably Lee Sin, who is in Wild Rift.
So Team Flash, Flash Wolves, RRQ, and Buriram United, what do you think are their strengths and weaknesses? Well, actually, strengths for each team first. Maybe we could start with that.
I think Team Flash's strengths are their flexibility in the mid lane. I think their flexibility with their mid lane and top side. I know we talk so much about like the ability to play between the jungler and the mid laner, but I just love the way that they're able to play flexibly. Beyond that, their team fighting is amazing. I think they do an amazing job of being able to mitigate losses. I really wonder how that's going to perform against like teams that can punish them harder against that. But for now, we haven't seen anyone that can really push them to that point yet. So as it stands, I mean, they can make mistakes and just not get punished for it.
I want to add on the fact as well, the jungler is cracked, the Baron lane is cracked, the mid lane is cracked, the bot lane's all right. But I think the top three players in this team can really make a dent against the best teams in the world.
Autolose, perhaps?
I think we were robbed of the opportunity to see two stylistically similar teams in RRQ and Team Flash going at it just because of what happened during the lower bracket finals. But it's plain as a day that in Southeast Asia, Team Flash is the best Southeast Asia team or the best Wild Rift team. Not only are they, the champions in WCS, but they're also Southeast Asia gold medalist, SEA Games gold medalist. So that just speaks for the strength of the team when it comes to their support staff and also their players.
What about Flash Wolves? What do you think about Flash Wolves?
For Flash Wolves, I've been so documented in saying that they have the best support system. Again, their organization has been in League of Legends for quite some time now. It's been ever since I started, covering for Wild Rift Esports, I've been really rearing myself. I've been preparing myself for the Flash Wolves dominance, and now they have proven that they are the best team in the Masters region. Not only that, is part of the top 2 teams here in Southeast Asia. So their support system will be up there. They also have this how should I call this? They have this thing in where they keep their emotions in check so they don't get too excited nor get tilted. And that's actually a very big factor because, again, when talking about the pro players, they already have the mechanics. But when it comes to the mental side of things, being able to perform at the optimum level at any given day, I think that's Flash Wolves for you. So whatever composition they would put out, pretty sure that they have planned it way, way, way ahead of time.
I agree with Otto here, and the fact is they'll never lose against a team that's worse than them, right? Like they are, by definition, I would say like the benchmark to test everything against. They will never lose against a team that's worse than them, but they're also very unlikely to beat teams that are like just genuinely better than them. And I don't mean teams that have a really good like wildcard factor. I mean teams that are just genuinely playing better Wild Rift than they are. Against teams with a wildcard factor like RRQ, I think there's a good chance they could still put up a good fight and probably win against them anyway. But against teams that I think we're getting to the points of like they're bad points now, so I'm just gonna like hold it here until then.
Yeah, I don't have many good things to say about Flash Wolves. The main thing I would say is I think the support's really good. I think the mid's really good. Bruce, Cookie's pretty good too. Bruce, Cookie, as well as why am I blanking on his name? What's his name? Support. Ethan, thank you. Yeah, those three guys are pretty good.
Now we go to RRQ. OMO, you could start with RRQ or.
Okay. Yeah, the mid jungle is really good. Exosen looks really good on some engaged supports as well, but we won't talk about weaknesses for now. Mid jungle is really good.
The mid jungle synergy again, Chaz has been voted, I believe, as one of the best newcomers in WCS finals. Has really elevated the game, his game and RQ's game to another level, and that's the reason why we call him the Chaz experience. Because whenever he plays and whenever you're there watching this guy, you would have that you would have to ready the oohs and ahs because he will just make plays left and right and center. Also, not to mention, Irelia got nerfed a couple of times now, so we'll see if Irelia will still get picked by Chaz.
RRQ looks like a team that, I kind of alluded to the idea of like the wildcard factor. When they faced up against teams like Flash Wolves, you could start to see like where the issues kind of lie. I think that if you have RRQ against any team in the world, there's always a chance they could beat them. But it is in situations against fundamentally solid teams, which are going to be the best teams coming into Icons. They really need to kind of step it up. I think that the lead time they've had going into this competition might help them even more. It's really this idea of like, I really need to see how well their performance is on a day-to-day. Like they could go from being one of a team that beats the best team in the world in a best of 7 series to a team that could lose against like playing teams on a bad day. Like they have that range going for them.
And we have Briram United, BRU. Grandon, perhaps?
Yeah, I'll go with this. So I think that BRU is interesting as a team because they are not the youngest players, right? Like they're generally a little bit older. They recognize that they're not like the most mechanically gifted, and so they kind of take a stance that they have to be smarter about the game, right? So we see a lot from BRU that's pretty innovative, that they are quite ahead of the meta. They're following what's happening regionally across the world, and they're also trying to push their own stuff into into a style that fits them well. That being said, I think they are still quite solid mechanically, which is why they can dominate against some of their opponents. But against really strong ones, I think I really need to see Noel stand out. He does really well as like a staple in lane, but he really has to pop off if they want to get his team ahead. I think Jess is like a big instrumental playmaker for his team, for BRU. And it's really, I want to see how those side lane options, like the top lane, the support, move around to try and activate the game.
The very obvious strength of BRU is obviously what the Jazz and when he plays strong roaming support, blah, blah, blah. But I do want to point out another reason I think this team did so well locally in Thailand as well as regionally was when Coden Feet had really good jungle champions, when the jungle champion pool fit his style. That's something I talk about in more detail with my podcast with TJ, Out of Hand. Check that one out. Yeah, but the main thing is we need to see how the meta shakes up. If Coden Feet has a good champion pool, if the meta favors what he likes to play, Jax, champions like Riven, then maybe him and What the Jazz will have a very good time together playing 2v2s. But then if you go back to traditional jungle champions, you have to play like Lee Sin. Maybe BRU aren't going to have the best time.
Again, What the Jazz is really the best player in Thailand by a mile. The Recon engages. Although I would say it's a double-edged sword just because they don't play the Senna lane that well. Just because it basically removes the roaming potential and the catch potential of just in the bot lane. And not to mention that they have a very underrated mid laner in Archony in the mid lane. Having watched the SEA games also opened my eyes to the stability that Archony brings to the table for BRU.
So coming into from the WCS, what were the stellar moments for these teams in the WCS finals?
I want to revisit weaknesses later on because that's a big point for me because a lot of these teams are very weak or have very clear glaring weaknesses. But stellar moments, I would say the junglers have been very, very standout for me. I think especially for RRQ and Team Flash, Zissou and help me out here, Otto. Chaz, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
They've had like really pop-up performances. Chaz specifically on that Irelia, you did mention it did get nerfed. I would like to see if he still wants to play that. And Zissou, I think is champion who did not get touched. I think he's going to be a monster at Icons. His Kha'Zix moments were the standouts for me.
I guess for me, like one of the standout moments. So I went into this thinking that Masters region was going to be pretty strong. I guess ultimately, like that assumption was kind of correct. But at the same time, I have to say, like, they, yeah, sure, let it. At the same time, when I look back at it, like some of the reasons why they were strong were the same reasons that I saw from like the regional play-ins, right? They went to WCS finals, things shifted up quite a bit. We've seen them evolve a lot from when they would have Bruce hyper carry every single game, and they try to get him on more like utility options. They try to have him on different kind of roles, so he's not always just going for the single thing. We expected them to go for a specific strategy, going for the double ADC compositions. They moved away from that as well. I like that there was that growth and development from the Masters region. For me, Flash Wolves demonstrated an ability to play for the other lanes. I think that was like, and as much as towards the end they kind of defaulted back towards Bruce anyway. Like I still like what was happening. Ysera was winning lanes in matchups that he had to win lanes against, especially against like guys like Devil J. Like that helped them a lot to close out like their first match against each other like way better, right? So it's stuff like that I'm really looking forward that was quite a nice experience for me. It was like Masters regions actually being proactive to take a fight as opposed to just like chilling for like 30 minutes or so.
Autolose, if it's like within the tournament, if he's
no, I just like the fact that I was able to sweep OMO on stage. On top of that, we
that
also
was
have
funny.
we also have 4 different representations. Again, the best case scenario is for us to send over 4 teams that have different or varying strengths, and we have that right now. Southeast Asia is playing as one. I do understand that they have different teams, but we are going to root for them for Team Flash, for Barira, for RRQ, especially RRQ by the way, and BRU in the upcoming Icons Global. So the stellar moment for me is that everything was like a story, and at the end of it all, everyone's happy. I hope.
All right. I know I sent you the questions earlier. The third question you already answered a while ago. So maybe we could talk about what each team could improve on going into Icons. OMO has a lot to say.
Yeah, okay. I'll just run through all the teams really quickly off the top of my head. Flash Wolves, like Grandon touched on, too passive. They don't do anything. They're too reliant on jungle and support to carry. They're too reliant on Bruce to carry. Ysera's champion pool is like 3 champions. I don't know. I just don't really like Flash Wolves. I think they coming in as a second seed from WCS, it's going to be a lot of expectations on them. I think, like Grandon said as well, they will not lose to teams which are worse than them, which are, frankly, a lot of teams are worse than them, but they're never going to be like a top WRL team. Beyond that, RRQ, consistency, I would say, is my main concern. Tilting. They look really good when they win. They look really shit when they lose. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there, but I hope that's something they figure out. What other teams are there? BRU, over-reliance on What the Jazz, too meta-reliant as well. I think this is a team which we're going to need to see a coin flip going into Icons, whether the meta is going to be good for them, whether they figure things out on the patch. If they look good, keep in mind this was the only team that brought Team Flash to 5 games. When they look bad, they got O3 turbo shitstormed by RRQ. Last team. What's the last team? Did I miss a team? Team Flash. No weakness. They're correct. Yeah.
Yeah. For Team Flash, it was a surprise to me when we did the post game interview. And they said that if they would rank themselves for the upcoming Icons Global, they said that they would be number 4. And that actually did not sit well with me. I do understand that China League is just on a different level. But when you're facing against the best of the best, if you surrender, the title already before the tournament even starts, that really just it is very alarming for me. For BRU, same with OMO, very heavily reliant on engages by what just that actually mitigates their ability to play the Senna, Nasus Senna Galio bot lane, which is actually a meta pick, or still one of the notorious picks in the bot lane right now. For RQ consistency, especially for Devil J, Devil J has to step it up. Devil J was, I would say, exposed heavily by Isera. Isera's experience was just on a different level. And that 1v1 in the top lane, there's really no one's going to, if you require for your jungler to help you on the top side, it basically, makes the map more readable for your opponent. And that, I think, is the reason why, if Devil J is going to surrender his lane that bad, it's not going to sit well for RQ. And meanwhile, for Flash Wolves, I agree with Leonard. They play passive at times, but that's basically their textbook play. Again, when we are talking about the play style of Flash Wolves, it kind of reminds me of Korean meta, that they will only fight whenever there's a big objective to fight for. And I still remember the 7-minute dragon dance, elder dragon dance that happened. And I think Flash Wolves was actually part of the of the playing teams back then. So yeah, for Flash Wolves, more on being more decisive and more on being able to just pull the trigger when when finding the right moment.
For me, like strengths and weaknesses are all relative, right? You could be a really bad team fighter, but if everyone is worse, it doesn't matter. Like, you'll still win your team fights. So I think looking at the groups that we actually have and we've drawn for like play-ins going into like the group stage, it's actually looking pretty decent for like a lot of our teams. Like a lot of their weaknesses are covered by the fact that they're going against opponents that don't really punish those particular parts. I look at like RRQ, we talk about how they might be a coin flip against like the teams that are in there. JD Gaming, I think it's going to be really tough for them. But between STMN and Unsold Stuff Gaming, like RRQ, they like to fight just as much as RRQ does. And so RRQ could have very likely a point where they can show off even more against these teams because of like a relatively good matchup. I think that's like the case for basically all our teams in the WCS going into play-ins. They just have like some really good matchups.
And speaking of that, where would you guys rank the C region against the other regions?
Second, clear second. Very unanimous.
I mean, I understand Korea is on a different level in League of Legends PC, but on mobile, not.
They
so
have
much.
one good team. They have like one good team.
Yeah, RY. That's it.
And China's still first.
Yeah.
They have a bigger player base. Again, talking about China's mobile gaming scene, I know in Southeast Asia we actually have a very big mobile gaming scene or mobile MOBA scene, right? But in China it's like multiplied by 2, 3, or 4. And when you have a bigger player base, when you have more players that are really competing at the higher level, the chances of you finding very, very good, very, very highly mechanical players will actually be a lot better. And I think that is working well for them right now, for China as a region. And I know that they sent 4 teams. It wouldn't surprise me if those 4 teams would qualify for top 8 easily.
That's a very good point. I think they would definitely qualify for top 8, but then going to top 4 is where it gets a bit exciting. I think that's where we're going to start seeing regions, team killing and whatever. Back to the point about regional strength, I think WCS is a clear second, like you guys said as well. Roster Y is Korea is like a 1-team region. Roster Y is like their only good team. I just wanted to unmute to say that all the Western teams are absolutely terrible. So they're shit. So yeah, just like WRL, WCS, WCK.
Okay.
The Japanese league is like Sengoku is alright as well.
They're pretty bad too. Yeah.
They're alright. Like I think given the kind of lineup that they're facing, because it's going to be Sengoku, Keiso, and then probably JD Gaming and RRQ. Maybe there's a chance, but it's gonna be tough.
But I saw a video, Leonard, Hell's Devil was saying at one point that having watched the China League and the Korea League made him, a big fan because they're the 2 best regions. You think that really is the case? Because I feel that, these Western talents are kind of underrating.
It's just Korea bias, just
Really?
Korea bias, because they're like, oh man, it's Korea. They're so good at League of Legends. They have to be good at Wild Rift, right? Like, oh my goodness, it has to be, And so they tricked themselves into thinking like WCS is like great. But you have remember. These are the regions that went into like Horizon Cup thinking that they were gonna get like 0-10 or something, So
Yeah, I mean, WCK isn't bad, but WCS is definitely better. I think depending on what the observer is looking out for, you could watch WCK and you could say, oh, they look a little cleaner, they look a little more streamlined. But keep in mind, they're also playing against other handshake teams. Like the handshake, okay, let's not fight until this dragon. WRL teams and WCS teams, they will come and dive you, they'll come and force fights. It looks messy, it looks chaotic. You could say, oh, just look bad. They look messy, they don't know what they're doing. But I feel like when you play aggressive teams against like teams like WCK teams, you will see a bit of a bloodbath. I think you'll see a bit of a slaughter. WCK teams can withstand that because they're like fundamentally very, very good. But I think other regions are just gonna get like wrapped.
Okay, so can we like segue this into the next point about like other regions? Because I want to like start talking about like where other regions are going to come in here, right? So we've established like, okay, we think the WRL is like really strong, WCS like right after, and then we have like KT roster, like the one team. And I think going into this one, that Brazil and NA are probably like the next closest, and then Japan's like right in there with them, right? So I want to see how these teams perform in the competition. And my understanding is that after the last international competition, the NA teams had like this whole discussion where they're like, we can't allow this to happen again, and then they tried to go back, get preparation done, and they've been like ramping up for this competition again. Like they don't want to have a repeat of what happened last time. And I respect it. And looking at their play, it's gotten a lot better from like the 4 ADC meta that they tried to pull off. Like now they're actually playing the game. They decided that we're not going to play like a single player game anymore. We're going to actually play it as it's meant to be against another really strong team. That was the biggest thing, right? They didn't have good competition. They weren't thinking about the competition ahead. Now they actually are. I think they have a better chance.
It still is the same. I mean, the level of competition, if they want to improve, talking about Western teams, they have to scrim, tougher opponents. And the tougher opponents are actually on the east side right now, right? East Asia, Southeast Asia, right? I remember back in, the League PC days, Western teams would boot camp in Korea. So what's stopping them from doing the same just for Wild Rift? Because if they're going to, try to plan for the best of the best in their region, the quality of their opponents, especially knowing that the other teams might not scrim them just because there's no longer, there's no tournament for them whatsoever, right? So finding scrim partners is actually a lot harder right now than it's supposed to be, or than it was from before. So I really hope, that the Western teams just went on to, go to Southeast Asia or possibly Korea to experience the solo queue, because I believe that our solo queue is definitely, hands down, better than theirs.
What these guys said, I echo that completely. If you want to talk about the other regions for a little bit, what I would say is I think NA, whatever. EU, I think look worse than they did last year, but they have a pretty good group draw again with Ricks. So that's a potential for upsets. The regions that I specifically want to look out for, well, I guess one region would be Brazil. I think Wild Tour looks pretty sick. They are aggressive. They're not afraid to make plays. Not the best fundamentally, but I think that explosiveness is really going to help them in a game like Wild Rift.
Back in the WCS, you would always talk about win conditions, right? What's the win condition for this team or that team? So our teams will be facing 20 other teams from all over the world, including FPX. Although you did say KT Rolster and T1 are pretty good, but since we're second. But what do you think would be the win conditions for each team that we have? Team Flash, Flash Wolves, RRQ, BRU.
It's for them to still play their game. I remember last year, Team Secret was able to take a game from the eventual champions, DKG, I believe. But that's them not really adjusting to the meta that China, the WRL teams had back then. And mainly right now, when looking at the meta and the favorite picks, you would see a lot of similarities between Korea and Southeast Asia. Now it's all for our top four teams to not really succumb to the pressure of the of the picks of the WRL teams. If they would bring out a couple of new picks, like for example Jax last year, also Leona in the bot lane was really a very big surprise to a point that it actually just changed the whole dynamics of the Horizon Cup. Right now is for them to just play their style, play to their comfort, and take it from there. Because if they over adjust, tendencies are you would lose some of the best qualities that you had and that made you qualify for this big tournament.
Man, okay. How See, I'm the kind of guy that likes like overthink things a lot, right? So when I look at this stuff and I think about like, okay, well, going into these individual groups, like what are the kind of things that need to be done? And this is something that I mentioned earlier. Against their previous opponents, we've already kind of like, we actually got some pretty good draws. Like Flash was in the group with Furious Gaming, Game Lord, and Nova Esports. Flash was, like I mentioned, like they will not lose against teams that have wildcard factors, right? Like Furious Gaming, Game Lords, they have that. Like they are able to like flip a switch and step it up a notch. I don't think Flash Wolves are going to lose against that. They have that consistency in their play. RRQ against like Unsold Stuff, JD Gaming, STMN. Like RRQ is the kind of team that could maybe even take a game off JD Gaming depending on how they're performing that day. Like they have that wildcard factor in them. They could go the distance, right? BRU against Freaks, Liberty, Sentinels. I think it's like honestly pretty clear cut. Like BRU just play better Wild Rift than they do. We have. I think going into like each individual group, a lot of things actually fit very well for the WCS teams, and so I'm just looking to see how they kind of go about it. If they bring like their good form to stage, I don't see an issue with them continuing on. The question is how deep can they go then, right?
Good question. All right, win conditions, but I think a lot of that comes down to really matchups. Different teams will have different matchups shaping up against whoever they're playing against, blah blah blah. But I think 20 teams in this competition let me rephrase that. They're going to be playing against 20 other teams in this competition. But at the end of the day, they're really only playing against like 5 other teams, like the 4 WRL teams and like Roster Y. So if you keep in mind how the matchup is going to shape out there, I want to specifically like tailor this to WCS teams versus WRL teams, right? Ignore the outlier of like Roster Y. And I would say most of the times it's going to be difficult because I feel like WRL teams do what WCS teams do, but like better. They're like more aggressive, better mechanically. I think it's going to be really tricky. And I think it comes back to what Otto says as well. They're going to need to pull out some curveballs. And if you look at the teams which are capable of pulling out curveballs, I don't think Flash Rose can do that. I don't think BRU can do that. So I think it really comes down to Team Flash and RRQ to have a chance to pull out something out of the bag and just surprise the WRL teams. That's probably like my win condition for them.
The meta always shifts. It's been how long has it been? A month or so since the WCS finals. But we've noticed, of course, there are some constant champions. Which champions do you think will be prioritized for this tournament for icons, and why?
So top lane, I think we're going to see exactly the same things. Like top meta never changes. It's always going to be Renekton, Garen, Darius. Like those are my guess for like the top picks. Beyond that, probably like Camille if it's available, but I imagine a lot of teams are still going to be banning her. That being said, where we get into like, okay, jungle, I guess like stuff like Kha'Zix, I think some teams like will like prioritize the Jarvan for some reason. I don't necessarily agree with that so much, but I can understand why they're trying to go for it, right? The only thing I don't want to see is just don't want to see Wukong. Like, please, like that's how it's so bygone. Like, let it die. Like, it's not a good pick. Just move on. Mid lane's where I think gets really interesting, right? Like mid lane, we have regions like the WRL who play really good assassin mids, right? Stuff like the Zed and things like that. And they execute so amazingly, like the ability to, and then even like the Japanese league, like they all use like the Zed and then like a Ziggs pairing or like something with like a global ultimate. And then they'll use that to assassinate like a squishy target. I think that's something that the Eastern teams do much better. When you look at the Western teams, like they've gone pretty diverse. They have stuff like even WCS, we've seen Darius mid, we've seen like Singe mid, stuff like that. In the West, we've seen stuff like Akshan, more AD carries. It's very, very diverse there. So the mid pole is actually the most interesting for me. Like anything could really happen. It's really dependent on playstyle. I think ultimately what's going to happen is teams are going to default back to what's best, which I think are going to be the assassins anyway. So Yeah, and then bot side, I don't know. Well, I'll let somebody else take these, I guess.
Yumi is still gonna get played. Morgana is OP, and they buffed her. Yeah, that's it for me.
Because of the skin. For the top lane, I know that Grandon really hates Wukong in the jungle web. I see a picture of the Baron lane Wukong being available. The stats right now is in a very, very good spot. The damages is there. The damage is there. Essentially the buff was so huge. To a point you could actually outduel Riven in the top lane as a Wukong. That actually speaks by itself, right? And plus having that, another game changer ultimate in the Cyclone will also help, setting up this dragon fights, referral fights. In the mid lane though, I'm excited to see Echo. Just because of the mechanics of this champion. It's a champion that was not available back in WCS finals, will now be will be available in the upcoming Icons Global. And I've seen a montage or a highlight play coming from the Rex mid laner on the Echo. Possibly, that could be a win condition for the European team. Outside of that, I'm ready to be surprised. Honestly, if anything, I know that I'm a huge abuser of Sinch, but I'm really not a fan of Sinch in the mid lane just because of how one-dimensional the pick is in the mid lane. Just wave clear and then be an annoyance. But really, Chinese teams and also WCS teams really find it very strong. And for a good reason, because it's very low econ. Rylai's Scepter is actually very cheap right now and has been buffed from 20% slow to 30% slow. So to me, we might see Singed again in the mid lane from a lot of these teams. For the bot lane though, Lethal Tempo, Kraken Slayer, a lot of more keystones that are now available for hyper carry. So we could see Jinx, we could see Vayne every now and then against this Garens, against this Singed.
And finally, what are your expectations coming into Icons, and what do you want to see, throughout the entire tournament, I guess?
My expectations, I don't know if I should say this because it's going to come off like kind of BM.
Just say it.
But I did my calculations, right? And I thought for a second, like, well, what are the teams that are going to make it? And my top 8 teams, the teams that are going to get out of group stage and into like playoffs, are like Team Flash, Nova Esports, JD Gaming, Sengoku, FunPlus, J-Team, K-Frost, and BRU. I don't think that there is a Western region, like the rest of the world, that's not in like WRL, WCK, is it WJL? That can, like the Japan Cup, that can really go up against like what we're seeing here now. Like we're just too far ahead, and even with the additional time with play-ins and group stage, it's still not enough, in my opinion, for them to cover like this deficit. Like they might be able to cheese out a couple wins or so, but it's the qualitative gap that we have right now is just so significant that I would be very surprised if we deviate too much from this, this pairing. Like it just looks so solid to me now.
I'll leave OMO to be the last person to answer that question, but my expectations is for the exciting games to happen at the later stages of the tournament. Similar to what happened during WCS finals, play-ins will be a lot of stumps. And are they fun to watch? Maybe yes, but for the rooting, fan base, I don't think that really is, going to be very, very, I would say, pleasing to the eyes. So this is a very, very big tournament. There's a lot of teams that got invited onto the Icons Global. This is going to be the first tournament, a very big prize pool. There is, and again, much more very good Wild Rift come later stages in the tournament, Leonard.
Yeah, I agree with what both these guys said. I'm looking forward to another split of Eastern dominance. I want to see regions like Brazil, though, step up. I think there's a lot of potential there. That's going to be very exciting. Other than that, yeah, I want to see very exciting games. I think that's definitely going to happen. #live on the wild side.